Hello, and welcome to Positive Fandom. I'm your host, Rrr Mmmm. Today we have Catherine Cooke with us, and we're going to be reviewing episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett series. How are you today, Catherine?
Good.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have to say that for this episode, I have mixed feelings about it, and I think a lot of people have mixed feelings about it. We've been waiting for this episode after being on such a high from episode 2 and having so many, interesting insights and discoveries into. I kind of felt like this one didn't match the same level for 2, as far as I'm concerned. What did you think?
I thought it was mixed. I was surprised that the Tuscans killed off as quickly as they did, because that was my prediction. I think this whole series is him just playing the long con to get back at the Pikes. And it's like, okay, that's where we're going with it. A lot of people haven't seemed to pick up on that, though, in the various reviews. I'm like, really? It's you kind of see what he's doing here. But this episode, I like that they spent more time in the present. But once again, Boba Fett's not being that smart. Like, he goes into town, finds out that this guy's overcharging for a bunch of water, and these punks are like, oh, they've spent money on these really expensive bikes and these cybernetic upgrades, and he doesn't really know anything about them, but he just decides to hire them on the spot. And I'm thinking, dude, you're Boba Fett. You've probably met all sorts of people in your line of work who would love to do this, because even if it is a long con, they could still stand to make a bunch of money. So it's like, why don't you call up the guys who tried to steal, the Han's Carbonite block from you in the War of the Bounty Hunter series, Because if Boba Fett had been there in the season finale of Mandalorian on the deck when Luke Skywalker showed up, he wouldn't have had any animosity towards him. It's like, yeah, it was just business, and Luke wouldn't have either. So it's like, by that same token, it's like he should be calling up people and being like, hey, let's do this. And like when the Black Chrysanthemum scene was awesome. That was like amazing. Granted, if it was the version from the comics, Boba Fett probably would have been dead. But when he lets him go, it's like, why don't you hire him? Give him a job. It's like, hey, how'd you get in here, But he doesn't, and I get the thing with the colorful bikes. They're trying to homage things like American Graffiti and stuff, but it's like, it was really hokey, and I'm like, oh, wow, this episode has like an OJ chase, because that's basically what it is. It's like this ridiculously slow move through the town, and the fact that the Major Domo just caves so quickly. He's like, oh, it was the mayor. He's working with the Pikes, and it's like, dude, he was going to figure that out anyway, because the Pikes are on their way over, so why are you running from him? But it's the same kind of thing where Boba's like sort of flopping and falling flat on his face and being had at every turn, even though there were some highlights. Like Danny Trejo is the Rancor handler. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. And again, Black Chrysanthemum being able to kick ass, and that's a genuinely scary moment when he just shows up there. But for the most part, I wonder if the faults of the first and third episode are because they're both directed by Robert Rodriguez, which is odd because he did the tragedy episode from season 2, which was amazing. And these two that he's done are kind of okay. At first when I watched it at midnight, I was like really hyped. I'm like, oh, this is great. But then I watched it again and then watched it a third time, and I'm like, yeah, this one doesn't really work as well.
Yeah, there's a lot in it that's very questionable, and of course, the elephant in the room is that Vespa introduction, and you did mention that they were trying to pay homage, but I personally felt like it just didn't fit in, and I think that there were things they could have done to make it fit in better. For example, fine, go ahead and have those colors, but make the design something that we're familiar with, something that feels more like Star Wars, or at least would be on Tatooine. And I think a lot of people mentioned that, there's so many different ways they could have gone with this. The other thing that disturbed me a little bit about that bunch was that when they mentioned, when the watermonger mentioned that, a bunch of cyborgs had taken his water or stolen his water, I had such crazy, aspirations of what I thought that these cybernetic people would look like. How about you? Didn't you think it would be something outrageous?
Yeah, when he said cyborg, at first I thought he might be lying, because it's like, this could be a trick, kind of like when they delivered the Rancor, and I thought, is this a trick? Are they trying to, it seems like a plant, because I'm still wondering if somebody opened the door to let Black Chrysanthemum in. Like, that could be, like, there might be a traitor. But it's like, when he says cyborgs, and then you see these kids, and it's like, okay, you can afford cybernetic upgrades. You can afford these bikes, which look more like they belong on Coruscant maybe than here. And And they do really look like Vespas because they're so the bottom of them are so huge and flat. It's like these should be riding on the water.
It's totally a Vespa.
And they're way too shiny to be on Tatooine. It's like, no, I mean, not that somebody wouldn't sell them there, but they would be covered in dust and dirt and pockmark. And so when you see these people and it's like, okay, so you hired a bunch of street punks. Okay. It's it's just,
yeah, their implants. I thought we were going to see some things perhaps that we hadn't seen before, Catherine. Something innovative, something that's, because we've seen new technology, not that it didn't exist before, but we know Fennec Shand has this incredible technology inside of her because Boba saved her. And somehow, he must have gotten access to something incredible. It was so cool when she revealed that about herself. So I thought maybe these guys have something that we haven't seen that's innovative, that's new. I was kind of disappointed when I saw when they actually had to challenge Black Chrysanthemum, and they were kind of using their implants against him, and it didn't look strong or powerful, like they were even worth having. What did you think?
Yeah, because the first girl walks up there and she just shanks him, and he kind of screams and backs up, but then they just go to using their little electrode devices that don't really do much of anything. I mean, they do try and restrain him a bit, and that doesn't work that well because he's Chrysanthemum and he's big and strong and all that. And I noticed it took quite a while for Fennec Shand to show up, which made me wonder because she's been smart every step of the way. She's the one who knows that, no, don't give him your helmet, don't do this, don't do that. No, we should just kill these people. And yet she showed up rather late, and I'm wondering, maybe she's betraying Boba, and maybe she opened the door to let him in. And upon realizing that he failed, it's like, okay, I better, put a stop to this. Because there might be something going on there. Because, I mean, Fennec Shand doesn't really have anything to gain from avenging the Tuskens unless there's a lot of money involved, which there could be. But it's still, I'm watching this and there's cyborgs, and I'm like, where on Tatooine did you even get this stuff? And is it that you can't afford the water, or are you thinking it's a matter of principle? Like you shouldn't have to pay that much? Because even Boba was kind of flabbergasted. He's like, 1,300. You should be charging like 500 at best. But I was like, okay, so you're the daimyo, and you don't know what's going on in town and these type of businesses. It's like, somebody pointed out the other day that the Boba Fett you saw at the very end of The Mandalorian, who walks right into the palace and just shoots Bib Fortuna dead, that's not the guy we're seeing in this series. And I get it a little bit because that's behind closed doors, so you could just kill him, and I can't imagine that Bib Fortuna was well liked. But I guess the idea is he wants to appear really nice and respectful so we could build up a lot of trust and build up a really big posse. But it's like, well, the Pikes have already shown up, and it's like, you're running out of time here, So yeah, that and the cyberpunks and the fact that he just shows up on his jetpack at the end of that whole chase sequence. It's like, what did these kids do? Really, not much. It's like they went on a little chase, but ultimately Boba's the one who kind of corners. It was mostly the Major Domo not paying attention to where he was going that caused him to crash, and then Boba's the one who corners him. So these other kids were just kind of there. It's like he didn't even have them watching the back door. It's like they walk. I mean, this guy's given him shit before, and they walk in, and Boba's like, did he just lock the door? I'm like, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. After that chase, or when the chase starts to ensue, I almost wondered why Fennec, she goes, get him, and they kind of go after him. I mean, you could clearly see that the guy was speeding away, sort of like behind the mayor's office, and they should have been watching. Instead, they were kind of like, what were they, rolling dice or doing whatever these kids were doing?
Yeah.
And what was really interesting about it to me was just how slow this race was. It felt like a Cadillac, like someone pulled up a 1970s Cadillac and tried to make it run, and it couldn't go very fast. And these Vespas didn't really seem to have very much power behind them.
Yeah, they seemed really heavy too, the way they're trying to bounce up on the buildings. And it's like, this seems like it's really, I mean, you should have a swoop bike, not a Vespa.
Yeah, and it felt like, I couldn't help but thinking about Back to the Future, how the hoverboard doesn't go over water. And I'm like, this should be something that was meant for, efficient travel, fast travel if you had to. But even the design, like I even looked at the overall design of these cybernetic parts that these kids have. And that also doesn't match what the Vespas have. It's like things are kind of felt like it was thrown together. And like I said, in addition to seeing innovative things, it's not that there's anything wrong with the girl's leg. It's just that, I guess maybe expecting to see something like we saw in The Winter Soldier, where he had an actual arm and it looked unbelievable, and it could do an incredible thing. So, I admit that my expectation was pretty high, but this is Star Wars, and we've seen like Luke has a perfectly decent hand that looks like a normal human hand.
I think, though, that's an entirely reasonable expectation, though, because when you say cyborgs in a Star Wars, it's like, oh, okay, these guys are going to be badass, especially if Boba Fett's going to hire them, and then they're not. It's like, that's been the meme that's been going around a lot, is that they're basically like Biff's gang from Back to the Future 2.
Yeah.
In that sequence, and, that the chase ending the same way, with the guy crashing in and getting, covered in all of the whatever the fruit is instead of the manure. But it's like, yeah, that's kind of what it is.
And we know there's more available out there, because even though it's true that some of the Sith Lords or the Dark Force users have had technology that they've been forced to use for whatever circumstance, we know that it does exist. Even, like 50 years ago in the lore, these types of technology existed. So that was something that I thought was very confusing for me. But at the beginning of the episode, Catherine, there are those monks, and we've seen the monks before in different episodes of or different movies and in Star Wars, where these monks are sort of like inside of this mechanical spider, and it is a really cool looking thing. Like, it looks cool, and it's their brain, and they've given up their corporal body, so to speak. They need the brain to still have consciousness. But and I wonder, I'm just looking into the episode, trying to figure the episode out in a sense. And I wondered if they were implying, and it's true, that they were kept captive inside of Boba's palace, and supposedly, Boba Fett released them, at some point, and that's why you're seeing them sort of crawl around in the area. Are they supposed to be a sign of what Boba Fett is now, this sort of enlightenment, where he's trying to reach a different level or plane of existence? Because I think that, by him kind of refusing to get into these physical altercations with somebody, maybe he's made a promise, or he's, kind of like made a vow to himself to not be as violent unless it's absolutely necessary. What do you think? Do you think that there's any sort of indication of that, especially with seeing the monks in the beginning of the episode?
Well, I think he's trying to, again, he thinks that if I rule with respect and people can trust me, I'm going to build up a lot more trust and a big posse. Kind of like, when the twins show up at the palace, and they freely admit that they sent Chrysanthemum to kill him, but then they're hightailing it out of there because the Pikes are coming. It's like, okay, they don't want to tangle with the Pikes, which is just they don't have as much authority or power as they implied when they first got there. But I'm wondering, do they think that Boba Fett can handle the Pike problem for them, and they're just going to want to come back and take it? Is that what's going on here? Because that's kind of a big 180, that you send Chrysanthemum here, and then several hours later, you change your mind. You're like, no, okay, you can keep him. We're leaving. And it's like, there's something fishy going on here. And so I am intrigued by that. There is that element of mystery.
There is an element of mystery. And let's look at the fight that Boba had with Black K. And I have to say, it felt really good seeing Boba kind of asleep in the back of the tank, and then someone opens up the tank and pulls him out of there. And it's like, slam, like it felt really good. It's like, how you like me now, pulls him out of the tank, throws him around. But to be honest with you, Black K is a boss. He's a boss. If you pretty much, if someone says, okay, Black K has, is going to collect a bounty on you, and, it's delivered, you could either be warm or cold. And, one blow from Black K would be like, you're done. You can't get up from that. So, I mean, just
he would have snapped him in half like a twig when he picks him up like that.
Yeah. So was Black K going easy on Boba for a reason? What are your thoughts about this fight?
Either that, or because, well, we want the fight to look badass. We want the surprise of him taking Boba by surprise when he's not ready, but we don't want him to kill him either, even though he probably realistically would. So it's like, because the twins say they sent him to kill him. So I would expect they just toned it down a bit because they wanted a cool looking fight. Because, yeah, a Chrysanthemum would have just snapped him like a twig when he did that. And it's like you hear his back like pop or something.
I know, like when he grabbed him like that.
Yeah, it's like, no, you're done. And that was a bit ridiculous. But I was surprised at how tough Chrysanthemum is too, because again, he gets shanked by that girl, and he just kind of shakes it off. And that's not even when he does the Wookiee scream. He does that later on down below. And I like how they showed that this stairwell is actually over to the side of where the carbonite block used to be.
So now we know where
yeah, so it's like where he picks up with the rest of the palace. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, did they redesign the inside? Because obviously I can't see how Jabba would have made his way around this place.
There are no doors. It didn't look like there was a door, right?
No, it's like there's the stairwell that goes into the main palace, and there's that short little steps that goes up where we had the carbonite block, and then you turn to the left and you have another stairwell that goes up to the Bacta room, which I haven't seen if there's any regular bed or anything in there. It just looks like it's a regular room. But I'm thinking, okay, I know that Jabba sleeps on that big throne that he used to have in there, but it's like, how does he even get out of here? Is there like a back door?
Yeah, it is very odd. And I can understand. It's like Jabba wouldn't need a door. He'd just need that hangar door where they, the Titor would carry him out now that we know these things, or at least we've seen evidence of this, going forward. Now, you did mention that, of course, we've seen more of the Tusken journey in this episode. And it, like I said, it's always good to see more of Tusken culture. Do you think that the warrior goddess, Tusken lady, and the child survived that attack after, when Boba comes back and discovers that there was an attack on the Tuskens?
I thought they were dead, but was she not there?
I've heard people say that they didn't, that her body was not there. And did you see the kid's body as well? Did you, it was kind of hard because, it's hard to recognize everybody. The only one that I could say I absolutely could identify was the leader. It looked like he had been, killed, unfortunately. And, I thought that was very interesting. I had heard, a lot of people talk about that it was kind of a long sequence, at least for the Tuskens. But, there was an interview. There's been a lot of interviews with the stars, with Tamora and Ming-Na Wen. And Tamora had mentioned that he had felt it was important that they take time in and be somewhat more ritualistic when, he was kind of paying homage to the death of the Tuskens. And I thought that was a very interesting thing. What did you think about some of the responses that some of the actors have had? Because from what I understand, Ming-Na Wen may or may not have said that there is going to be a big surprise coming up. And, everybody's kind of hoping for this. I'm hoping for a shock. As I said, the next thing that I would like to see them do, or see someone do, is kind of like blow up the palace, shake things up a bit. But you have very, obviously mentioned that from what we're seeing, that's not the type of, or it doesn't feel that that's the type of direction they're going in. Do you think there really is something that's going to come into the episode that's going to shake things up, as Min Hua-Yen has indicated, or not?
Well, if she said that, then I guess there will be, even though they really shouldn't be saying that, because otherwise it's not going to be as surprising. But something's going to have to happen, because you can't just keep having each episode be Boba Fett just falling flat in his face every time, at every turn. So, and then there's still not clear how much time he spent with the Tusken tribe. Was he there for 5 years? And then right after that, he went to get his armor? It's not like, okay, maybe. So I would expect something to happen sooner rather than later, especially now that the Pikes have shown up. Because we know that the Pikes are the ones who killed the Tuskens. It's like, yeah, they may have hired the Swoop Bike people to do it, but it's like, you knew the second Boba's trying to lay out his charts. I'm like, they ain't gonna follow that, And so, of course, they killed him. So if they show up, okay, that'd be, I guess, interesting. But I'm more intrigued right now as to find out what's Fennec Shand aiming to get out of all this. Like, did he promise her, you can take over this when I'm done, because I'm only here to get the Pikes and you can have it all? Or, like, I'm not really sure.
No, this is a good question. And, there's another theory that I want to, which I'm sure you've already heard about. And we've kind of alluded to it as we have been speaking about this episode since it began. But, Fennec Shand's motivation is also not there. And while it is true that she does owe him her life, I think that he must have promised her something else, because it just isn't good enough to go ahead and say that she's going to be sort of like dedicated to him forever. She's an intelligent assassin. And I think that she, he can't hold her there. He can't force her to stay there.
And so, they still haven't told us why they were meeting to begin with. So
absolutely. and this is something that I think is very interesting, because it was at that moment that things seemed to kind of work in Boba's favor in regards to finding Fennec in time just before she dies, and also being able to get his armor back in a timely manner, giving him these two extra things that. Well, do you really think that he would have bothered to go back to Jabba's palace and kill? Kind of go in there and try and take over without his armor if he hadn't found his armor?
No, I think he just wanted to. Well, that's just something he wanted to get back first. And since he saw where it was going, it's like, oh, it's leaving with this other Mandalorian. I'm gonna go get that first, and then we'll deal with this later.
Mm-hmm. And do you think he knew that Cobb Vanth had, I'm saying the right guy's name. Do you think Boba knew the man had his armor before Din Djarin came into play? Or was it a discovery? And if he hadn't discovered it, do you think he would have held off on trying to go back to...
That's the thing I can't figure out, because it's like, they're not very clear on the timeline. Like, how long was he with the Tuskens? Why is it that how is it that he just suddenly discovered them out here with the crate dragon, and he sees the armor and he's leaving, and he's not trying to do anything about it, and he waits to do something about it till he goes off world? And it's like, this is kind of weird. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's something to think about. And, there's still a lot of unanswered questions from that. You and I both have watched the episodes, and we've heard Fennec Shand say that they're shorthanded and they don't have enough people, and that she could go out on her own and Boba doesn't have to go out with her. Since they are shorthanded, how do you think, what other resources does Boba have? I mean, we know he has Slave One, which we haven't seen yet, and everybody is eager to see Slave One. But, does he have other ships? This is something that I'm really curious about, because, we already saw at the end of the episode that there's a bunch of pikes that are coming, and that's probably just a fraction of them. That's probably just a fraction of what's arriving every day and building up. And, he knows that they're mounting this war. What other resources do you think Boba is actually going to call on the Tusken Raiders that may still be, alive on Tatooine to fight on his side?
Well, given how tribal they are, maybe not, because it seems like each of them are followed. They're not all together. They're just kind of different nomad groups. But frankly, the Tuskens wouldn't be able to put up a fight against the Pikes. The Pikes have technology and blasters and Gatling guns and all that on their side, and the Tuskens, they look cool, but they're no match for that. As far as whether he has any other ships, I don't know, because the palace doesn't seem to have a garage. I mean, there might be a landing pad somewhere for Slave One. The sail barge is gone. I don't know what ship, if he had one if Jabba had one, that'd be capable of going off world. If there was, it's certainly not there. And it's not really clear what Bib Fortuna was doing if all it took to take over was just to shoot him. And it's like, okay. Or maybe the other people there just didn't want to bother with it because they knew that would irk the ire of the Hutts. So I don't know as far as where that's going. We'll see. But we know at some point he's going to be chairing the meeting with everybody inside the palace to deal with this problem.
Yes, and this could be a good opportunity for the Pikes to completely take over and get rid of the three families, couldn't it?
Yeah.
So now the other thing that I wanted to run past you is we are seeing a lot of visions of Boba seeing scenes of himself on Kamino, and he's mentioned Kamino. Well, he hasn't mentioned Kamino. He's mentioned that he grew up in a place that was surrounded by water, and and he kind of like which we knew this. But we've seen these flashbacks of him seeing the Slave One, zoom away. And you and I have talked about this. It could be his father, it could be someone else taking the ship. But I had to wonder to myself, since he's still going into the Bacta tank, from what I've heard some chatter about the fact that he may be so physically damaged or have so much damage in him that he needs to go back to Kamino. And the reason that he may need to go back to Kamino is because he might need, since he is a clone, he may need a copy of source material. Now, I found this very interesting because, of course, in the Clone Wars, I guess season 7, or it might even have been the Bad Batch, actually, we see the Camino is destroyed, and the Omega character, talks about how there was another lab and they destroyed that. But I can't help but wondering if there is some sort of connection, because Fennec was the person who was kind of protecting Omega at some point. And, I think that, I don't know whether she has spoken to Boba about Omega and whether he's aware who Omega is, but she's also, a clone, of course, or let's say one of the descendants of the original genetic material from Django. Do you think that there is actual any sort of levity to the idea that Boba would need to get more source genetic material for regeneration so that he can kind of get his stamina back? Or do you think this whole thing that he's doing, where he's in the back to tank and, is just not sort of flexing his or spreading his wings just now, he's just holding back, he's actually as strong as he was before? What are your thoughts?
I think he's just doing the back to tank just to get stronger. Camino was destroyed. Fennec Shand was not Omega's friend. She was trying to kidnap her and take her back for the purpose of the Kaminoans wanting to kill her. And it's like, yeah, Boba keeps dreaming about Camino for some reason. And maybe the idea is that he keeps looking outside and seeing his dad keeps leaving him or something. But I mean, the idea that he would have to go back there and okay, if you have more genetic material, okay, but it's not like you're going to infuse yourself with it and that would magically regenerate you. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like he's that injured anyway. It's like he gets in the back to tank just to kind of, it's like he's juicing for each night a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, he certainly looks like he's in good physical condition when you look at his body. I don't know how old Tamora Morrison is, but I imagine he's probably in the 40 to 50 year range.
He's 61.
He's 61?
The actor, yeah. And the character of Boba Fett would be like 41 or 42.
Tamora Morrison is 61.
Yes.
He looks good for a 61-year-old. I mean, his physical condition is, really very good. So, for what it's worth, if Boba is a little bit younger than the actor, I wouldn't have guessed.
I've also noticed that, when you first saw him in season 2 of The Mandalorian, you get a better look at him because it's more well lit and everything. When he takes the hood off, you could tell that he was a lot more pale and had all these extra scars. So I think that's something else that the back to tank's been doing. It's just been gradually healing his skin and stuff because he looks more sprightly now in the scenes in Book of Boba Fett than he did in season 2 of Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. So that might be something else that the back to tank's doing, just kind of getting general health back.
Well, what's interesting about this is that you're absolutely right. It does seem like he is, he looks physically better. He certainly doesn't have, I think that his overall mental state right now, from what we're seeing of him, he seems pretty positive considering what's ahead of him and what's in store. And I think that once he has these kids, and I'm calling them kids, the Vespa gang, now that they're kind of working for him, I have a feeling he might decide to look at since weapons are sort of like the religion of Mandalorian, or a person who pseudo Mandalorian, rogue Mandalorian, Boba Fett, he might look at their weapons and say, you know what, we can do better than this. I would like to see him take, some of what their augmentations are and kind of juice this up and say, this is actually what you should have here. I know you paid a lot of money for this, but this is more on the level of what, could benefit you if you do this. The other thing that I was going to ask is about the motivations. And, I've talked about this to you, with you about what exactly is motivating him. And as you said earlier in our discussion today, that, you think that this is the direction that the series is going, and this is what they're intending. But I still feel like we need to have more of a motivation for Boba as to why he feels he has to take over the underworld, so to speak. Do you think that this episode gave us any other indication as to why he may be doing this?
Get back at the Pikes. I don't get the sense that he's taking over the entirety of the underworld. It's like he specifically went to Jabba's palace on Tatooine because that's where the Pikes kind of have a smaller base of operations. And again, given Boba's line of work, he probably wouldn't have had any trouble finding all sorts of people who would love the idea of taking over the whole underworld, but he's not really doing that. He's kind of just starting this little nest egg on Tatooine, and it's like, okay, this is a little odd, but and the same thing with Fennec Shand, like they're after something. Like he wants to avenge them, but it's like he will be standing to make a lot of money in the process if he succeeds at this. So
Sure. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So that'll be, and I expect there to be another plot twist in the next episode, because again, him just standing around on the sidelines getting updates about what the Pikes are doing, or walking around in the street and getting their ass handed to him, it's like, that's not going to fly for the next 4 episodes. But it seems like they are setting up the idea that he's going to ride the Rancor into town at some point. Like he says he wants to ride it, and he mentions that he's ridden beasts bigger than this. It's like, okay, that's something we're going to probably see then.
Now we saw a really cool Easter egg. Well, maybe it's not exactly an Easter egg, but I think it was, or a sighting of Pele with her droids walking through town. And I thought that was really nice. I think it would be cool if she does kind of get into this, because I hope it's indicating, as you know, she's a shipwright, so to speak. And, or amongst other things, I'm sure Pele has plenty of skills of stuff that she can do. She's, at least from what we can gather, she's a shipwright, and maybe, she's helping Boba with Slave One, and, some other things in preparation. So I kind of am hoping that that's the case. I'm not going to say, yeah, she was heading towards the palace. I have no idea which direction she was walking in, but, I hope that that's an indication that, or at least a hint that we may see something like that. And it was in the scene that Boba was kind of looking over, as he was riding the Bantha, around, or at least he was on something. I think he was on a Bantha. I could be wrong on that, but it was a scene where he was looking around and you could see that. Now, what scenario would cause Boba to ride this Rancor into town? The Rancor, we haven't even seen him stand up. He was depressed. It's like getting this Rancor to a point where he's even going to allow him to get on top of him. This Rancor has imprinted on Boba. What do you think about these sort of Rancor revelations? Are you surprised by what we've learned about the Rancor? And, do you think this is something that's really interesting and good for this particular series?
I'm not surprised by any of it, because there was a Rancor Wrangler last time in there, and they must have been a more intelligent creature than it looks. Because you look at the pit, and it's like, okay, the people get dropped down into the larger section of the room, and it's a cheat, because obviously the Rancor couldn't fit behind the gate with that tiny. Because you see how the ceiling just kind of dips down, and you have that tiny little gate. It's like, obviously that's a cheat that they did that in the movie. It wouldn't fit behind the gate. But since since there are Rancor keepers, and it makes sense that they're more intelligent, that they're able to train them and stuff like that. But as for what he's going to do with it, like ride it into town and destroy whatever the Pike's headquarters is at some point, because Peli Motto is from Mos Eisley, so that flashback, I take it he was going to Mos Eisley to see that particular Pike. Whereas Mos Espa has apparently expanded, because it used to be on the plains, and now it's like in this canyon that some have speculated is the canyon from the pod race. And it makes sense that there's multiple families running it now, since the Hutts haven't been running anything for 5 years. Or at least I don't think Bib Fortuna is a very good leader. He doesn't sound like one, seeing as nobody has complained about the fact that Boba killed him.
Yeah, there doesn't really seem to be very much concern about Bib Fortuna. And one other thing I wanted to ask you is, they did tell us, of course, at the beginning of the episode, the Transdotians have this area, the Aqualish have this other one, and the Cletonians. What do we know about all three of these groups of people, races rather, or species, whatever you want to call them? Do we know more?
The Trandoshans, of course, are the ones that come from Trandosha. They like to hunt Wookiees and enslave them and stuff like that. The Aquilarish come from Aquilaris, which is a city that's been overrun by, or a planet rather, that's been overrun by floods. That some of their cities are like half sunken underwater, but that's fine for them because they're aquatic creatures. As for why they're on Tatooine and running a faction there, I'm not really sure. I don't think they'll probably dive into that. It's just that they want to populate it with a bunch of different aliens, I guess. But yeah, I'm not really sure where that aspect of the show is going, but I think we're going to get to, I still think that this is a long con. Like, he just wants to get the Pikes. Because the fact that he was willing to help Din Djarin all the way to the end to get the kid back. It's like, okay, so you got your armor back and you respected him for that, so you're going to help him with this. And once you're done with that particular job, you're going to go back to Tatooine to do this. And given how honor-driven he was in The Mandalorian, then it makes sense that he would want to honor the Pike or the Tuskens and not just let that go. So that's why it seems pretty clear to me that that's what this is all about. And the fact that he is right, that you can stand to make more money with those type of syndicates if they're all working together, that's like an incentive for people to come and help him. But as for what will happen once he achieves this, is like, will he stay on the throne, or is he just going to go back to being a nomad? We'll see.
Yes, and it is very interesting to question this. The Pikes, from what I've seen in a bunch of series, they're heavy into like spice, spice production, spice mining, spice distribution. And so, what's interesting about this, or at least, I've seen spice, we've seen spice throughout the series and throughout the universe, but what I'm curious about is spice sold as something that is a legal substance? Is it, in other words, when the Pikes are kind of like involved in this, especially in the Clone Wars season 7, and the girls had kind of like had that spice shipment, or they were going to do something with the spice shipment. Are the Pikes dealings with the spice shipment? Is it a legal business, or is spice an illegal substance? I guess that's what I'm trying to ask.
I don't think it's illegal for the most part. It's just that they're trying to, like, the guys like the Pikes are trying to evade all the regulations so they can make more money off of it. Because it said that it could be, it sounds more like a snake oil type thing. It could do all sorts of stuff. It can extend your life. It can heal your problems. It could, it's like a drug to get high on. It's like, it can seem to do almost anything. And I think that's we've been to the spice mines at Kessel, but we didn't really get to see the spice there. So I think this, in the series, in the second episode, was one of the first times we actually get to see it when he digs it out. So they are, the Pikes are not to be messed with, and unless you're going to expect to really have to pull the wool over their eyes, you're going to win, which I think Boba Fett's going to do at some point.
I think so, and it seems like he is messing with their spice production. At least from everything that I've seen the Pikes do, it's always surrounded, or it's obviously not completely limited to, but a lot of what we've seen is just how much they depend on the money from spice. So, we already saw Boba kind of infiltrate and intercept one shipment, which I don't even know how much spice was on there, but knowing the value of the spice, even just that one, box could be quite high. And, we still haven't been told why the spice is going through or over the sands of Tatooine. Maybe it's like, money laundering, it's spice laundering. They have to move small shipments, and maybe Tatooine is the place where they can kind of like take certain portions of the spice, sell it there for, for cash or whatever, and people will buy it. And maybe it's a good, a good lucrative business for them, and they don't want to lose that. And, Boba is kind of interrupting that and, causing all sorts of havoc anyway. So, I was just trying to figure out how that power struggle and the spice would kind of all play, together. But, I'm really wondering at this point what the surprise is going to be. It was great to see Danny Trejo as sort of the handler for the Rancor. I'm looking forward to seeing Boba ride this Rancor, but I'm also wondering, what would compel him to feel that he had to ride the Rancor? So, in other words, is he going to use the Rancor when he goes into battle, or is he just going to, this is his titer, is the Rancor. And they did allude to the sort of the Darth Marion sisters, I can't remember what the exact words he used, but the Night Sisters, right? Riding the Rancors. I had no idea that they did that. I really loved the Darth Marion, the Night Sisters, because of how they treated, or at least to me, it felt like they treated the use of the Force like a religion. And, it really just was so pervasive in their lives, just for all of them. And I just really loved how they were able to kind of manipulate and do different things, like when they created, when they would take somebody like, I can't remember the guy's name, but when Asajj Ventress was betrayed by Dooku, they went ahead and created another like stronger fighter for her, so to speak. I know I'm not saying that correctly, but who happened to be Maul's brother. But the point that I'm making is that the power that they possess and the ability to manipulate the Force is very interesting. And I think it's also very interesting that they're kind of like have Rancors and just say, yeah, we're just going to ride Rancors around. But do you think that going from this point forward, are we going to see the mayor again, even though he's with the Pikes, so to speak? And do you think the Pikes are going to try and have a peaceful resolution with Boba now, even though they're kind of infiltrating? Or do you think they're just going to do a sneak attack? Because as we've spoken before, a sneak attack is long overdue, or some sort of, major shakeup. What do you think?
We'll see the mayor again at some point. There's no reason for him to really completely leave. And the Pikes are not going to forgive Boba for what he did. So, and he's just one guy. So they're going to be like, yeah, okay, you're done.
And these guys are different from, there's another group. I'm trying to remember what the name of them are. The Niktos. In one of the previous episodes, we saw the Niktos even there. What is their role in all of this? Or are they just another group of opportunists?
Who?
The Niktos? Aren't they the ones who, I guess, are making all those markings on the...
Oh, those guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're... I take it the Pikes hired them to kill the Tuskens. I don't really know what the symbol means. Some people said their job is tax collectors, or maybe they used to be that. So, who knows? They're just thugs there,
Yeah.
Hide guns for hire.
Well, that's it's something to think about, and I'm just trying to think of all the different people who are stakeholders in these episodes. But for me, like I said, I kind of felt this particular episode was a little bit short, and I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of a motivation for Boba. I think that if I had seen like a motivation for him, or got that sense of why he's doing this, then I could kind of say, okay, well, they've had this Vespas in there, and that's one thing. And he dealt with, an aggressive, an incredibly, strong, aggressive Wookiee, and that was fine. But still not knowing exactly what's pushing him in this direction it's hard for me to follow this. And I'm hoping that the next episode will go ahead and give me that justification for what he's doing.
Yeah, he wants to get back at the Pikes and avenge the Tuskens. That's definitely what this is. I mean, for him to have agreed to break into like the Imperial hideout on that planet when they in the Believer episode in season 2, it's like he's doing all of this because he feels that he owes Din Djarin, because honor, you have armor, so I will help you to get this kid back. And he's really pushing it, like going after Moff Gideon and storming his ship and all that. And if he's sticking his neck out for the sake of honor, then there's no way he's just going to let the Tusken slaughter just go for nothing. Like that's definitely what he's doing. But it's just questionable how he's going about it. And it's like, okay, you're going to have to spring your trap or whatever your master plan is at some point. And I wonder if the surprise is going to be that Boba has actually had something else up his sleeve that he hasn't mentioned yet. Or maybe, like I said, maybe Fennec Shand is a traitor. We don't know.
Yeah, I really think that the idea of Fennec kind of like, wanting to break ties with Boba, especially at this moment, is very interesting and certainly something to be considered. And I also think that one thing that we're learning about, people who seem to have this Mandalorian armor or kind of like on this code is that they are pretty honorable at times. And, if that's going to be something, if the code or the idea that they have to stick and do the honorable thing is something that is their motivation, I think it's really interesting to look at them that way. And I'm fine with that. If this is going to be the way it goes, so be it. But, it is very interesting to kind of look at it from that point of view. And there was one other thing that I wanted to ask you about. And that has to do with, what does it have to do with? I had it in front of me. Oh, yes. So, HasLab, this company that makes, the toys. I ordered the Razor Crest, and supposedly the Razor Crests are on their way, which is nice. They had a campaign for Rancor. And, unfortunately, it didn't go to fruition. They weren't able to, it wasn't fully funded. But now, after seeing this episode, do you think that HasLab campaign for Rancor would be successful now if they introduced it?
No, I mean, I think one of the problems, first of all, with the Rancor, when they showed the design, it looked really cheap, like a regular toy. Because HasLab, they do the really nice, like you said, the Razor Crest, the sail barge. And I looked at the Rancor, and it looked kind of like, like one of your Jurassic Park dinosaur toys. It didn't look like there was a lot of money in that. And this is HasLab; they're affiliated with Hasbro, and it's like, why do they even do these Kickstarter campaigns? I don't know. Because clearly they have enough money to make it if they want to. So that's kind of silly, and it doesn't seem to be good for publicity. That we're gonna hype everybody up over this thing. But we need to get at least like 50 or 100 orders or whatever it is. It's like, that doesn't sound like that's a very good strategy for building customer confidence. But I don't know, maybe with this Rancor it might do something. I don't know if they'll bring it back, because they sounded like they were just going to kill the project. So I don't know. I thought it was overpriced for the design of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. And my final question to you has to do with the race, as they're doing this chase scene of this land speeder or land cruiser, or whatever you want to call it, and the Vespas. There's one part in the scene where there's a picture or a painting. And the painting is, of course, it's Jabba on, sort of like on his throne, so to speak, the whole gang. And ironically, in the picture is Boba Fett standing, I guess, to the right in the picture. And of course, the picture gets destroyed because someone races through it and breaks the painting. I thought it was very interesting that they chose to use that, because obviously, it's a symbol of how popular, I guess, or let's say, people still view Jabba as sort of like as a ruler or something like that. Do you think that is honestly true, that they were so enthralled or so enamored of Jabba that they would still be making paintings of Jabba?
I wondered, were they taking the painting out of a building, like maybe taking it off the wall after, now that Bib Fortuna's gone, the last remnants of Jabba's regime, we could just rip this crap out. Maybe. I mean, I know it's a Ralph McQuarrie painting, concept art, which is pretty cool. I mean, obviously they didn't destroy the real one, but I looked at that and I thought, okay, that's kind of nice, but they didn't really. I have to watch it again. I don't know if they were selling it, if they were moving it. Were they taking it out of somewhere or moving it? I'm not really sure. It was just kind of there, and then it just, look at that, and then it just gets destroyed.
Yeah, and it's very ironic, because of course Boba Fett is actually in the painting. And so I thought that was very interesting. The painting gets destroyed. Perhaps they're talking more about, it's a symbolism of the structure of how things were, rather than, everybody in the picture getting destroyed, because technically speaking, Boba is deceased. Bib Fortuna is deceased. I don't know who else is alive in that painting. So I wasn't quite sure if that was sort of like telling us that, maybe everybody in that painting isn't going to be, may not be around much longer, including Boba Fett himself. So I wasn't quite sure if that might have also been the implication of seeing that painting destroyed, whether it meant that,
Yeah,
we
I
might
would hope not. I mean, if they were going to kill him off, he's got to be a big time badass to earn that, because it's not been what we're seeing in the first 3 episodes so far, except for the train attack and the flashback. But even that didn't look as bad as it could, because he's wearing that ridiculous onesie. I'm like, it's painful to watch. It's like
it did look ridiculous. It looked like he was and it did look like a big baby onesie, not even sort of like a flight suit or something. It just didn't suit him well, but that's okay, But I did just want to thank you for joining me today. And I wanted to ask you if you have any final thoughts about this episode or the series going forward.
Well, given the change in directors moving forward, I think we're going to get a different flavor, and that hopefully it'll be better, because I thought Robert Rodriguez stumbled a bit on the first and third, and I can't remember the name who directed the second episode, was a lot better. So we have other directors, some of them new to Star Wars entirely, coming up. So I hope that'll really get things going and, provide a better tone for the show.
Yeah, I'm certainly on board with you on that, Catherine. I think that a new tone or a new shift right now would be very beneficial for the series, and and that's a good thing. Let's get a sort of a fresh feeling to this, especially with the Rancor that's coming into play, and Boba saying he wants to spend more time with that, and also that Fennec Shand storyline that you presented. I have a feeling there's definitely more to Fennec's involvement in all of this, and hopefully we'll learn more in the next episode. But I wanted to thank you again for joining me today in reviewing this episode. Where can people find you, Catherine?
Wednesday nights on the Phantasmagorium Show YouTube channel at 6 Pacific, co-hosting Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns, and every second and fourth Sunday of the month on the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel, co-hosting The Unifying Force, a Star Wars talk show at 8 a.m. Pacific.
Fantastic. And of course, you can find me here on Positive Fandom, my YouTube channel. Just 2 words. You can also find me streaming on Twitch, 1 word, Positive Fandom. But you can also find me on Monday nights streaming with Lorraine Creole on Toxic Femmes at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can also find me on Thursday nights on the 1/6 Scale Man Network at 9 p.m. On the show Uncivilized Scoundrels. At 12 o'clock in the afternoon on Fridays, Eastern Standard Time, you can find me on Midnight's Edge. And at 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays, you can find me on Midnight Metal on the Burn Network. I want to thank you for watching this episode. Of course, Catherine and I will be continuing to review the series, The Book of Boba Fett, as more episodes come out. And for those of you watching, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And for everybody out there, always remember, please be kind.